Dude, if you could put us in the same room right now, do you think our intro would not have some sort of like me coming at you with a knife kind of thing? Like, it'd be so funny, right? Like, and also, I really love that you did not react to me just having a knife at the ready.
I didn't think it was weird. You lead the way. This is your pick.
You made it sound like I am responsible for you watching this movie and you're not happy about it. You're like, you pick this, you just do the whole podcast yourself, please.
Please, this is your pick. Lead the way,
That's not at all the way you said it earlier. You're so full of shit right now.
Okay, fine. In all honesty, would I have seen this film if it were not for this podcast and Belize recommending this film for said podcast? No, probably not. Am I happy that I saw this movie? Yes, absolutely. Why? Because Jennifer Love Hewitt was God's gift to humanity in the 1990s. And I just liked seeing her exist.
Okay, well, I'm glad you have a couple thoughts, because yeah, you definitely didn't sound like you were happy you saw it either. So I feel like you had to pull at something as to the reason why it was good, which I'm surprised that she's the only reason, and not, Buffy or Freddie Prinze Jr. or any, and all the actors, but okay.
I love all the actors, actually. What's funny, I think, about this lineup is that we're making a podcast about love stories. These actors are going to be in a lot of movies we talk about.
And this definitely, love is definitely not as big a theme in this movie as some of the other movies that we've talked about. This is more sort of towards the horror area because of Halloween and everything, so it's a little bit outside. But enough that I would still say that if we were to make something like this, I would still put it under Heartbreaker Films, because there is.
I disagree with the fact that the love story isn't as prevalent, because I think it is the whole thing. The second I was watching it, I was like, oh, I totally understand how you would consider this to be a horror romance, because Belize mentioned prior, she was like, oh, I get my romance fix from teen slasher movies. And I totally get why, because that's the heart of it. If we didn't care about these people wanting to be together and having something to share with each other, then there's no purpose.
Okay, great. I'm glad that you see it that way then. Awesome. So I know you didn't love this movie, right? But it's kind of but you love the actors. So if this was a TikTok, it would almost have that sound of this bitch walked, okay? So this one could run, that one. I feel like that's a great sound for what this movie is and what it led the way to for a bunch of these actors.
That is this bitch walked. She strutted that runway, mama. So that Peppa could run. That's exactly how I feel about this entire film, to be honest. This movie is the blueprint. Am I right?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know if you know that this was written by the same person who wrote Scream as well, which is pretty cool to know. And I think makes a lot of sense. And my top two favorites, I Know What You Did Last Summer and then Scream right after it, in terms of the way you do it. I've seen a good amount of teen slashers and just none of them cut the same way this one does. But I just wanted to do that real quick. But yeah.
That's why you come to Heartbreaker Films. You come for the movies. You stay for the puns.
Oh God, no. Absolutely not. I don't think there are very many puns in our films, luckily, but it's okay.
And I like the thing about this movie is that it doesn't waste time getting to the point. It very much is boom. Well, it's the inciting incident. Any single movie does that. But the point I'm trying to make is they all decide to make the pact that we're not going to go to the cops. We're not going to tell anyone about this because they're afraid of ruining their lives. But what's funny is that the lie is what's ruining their lives.
Yeah, exactly. Guilt is the main motivator throughout the whole movie. And what did you think about that whole dynamic between them and the decision, and how it's basically really Barry that's kind of pushing them all to agree to it? Because at first it's the two girls that are the smart ones that are let's go to the police, and then really quickly Sarah Michelle Gellar's character Helen kind of also jumps on board eventually.
Let's pause and give them the lineup of actors because this thing is iconic. So we have Jennifer Love Hewitt, who's playing Julie, who I think is our final girl. Like, she's our main protagonist. We have Sarah Michelle Gellar, who plays Helen. We have Barry, played by Ryan Phillippe, who, if you're a fan of Cruel Intentions, that combination is just hilarious to me. And then we have Freddie Prinze Jr., who plays, what's his face?
Ray,
which is so hot. I don't know why. But I also think it's funny that in the casting of this movie, they were literally like blonde, brunette, done.
It's interesting that that's a thing that we see so often. And I'm like, I get it, because the whole psychological, you like someone who looks kind of like you know what I mean? Yeah, but I personally, I'm like, I don't find it visually as appealing because it's definitely not as fun. I definitely, the first time I watched this, because I had already seen Scooby-Doo at that point, they were married at that point, I thought it was super weird to see a movie where Sarah Michelle Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. are not dating each other.
Let's talk about real quick, We Are Heartbreaker Films. Let's talk about the real love story that came out of this movie, which is Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar met during the making of this film. You know the story better than I do. You want to give a little synopsis on how these two people...
I don't know that much about it. I know that they met during the making of this movie, and then they reconnected years later when they got cast together for the Scooby-Doo live action. And then after that, they got married and, well, dated and everything like that. But.
Well, the story I read about in a magazine, like specifically, is exactly what you said. They met during this film. They reconnected during Scooby-Doo, and then they had like mutual friends who... They both had a mutual friend they were going to meet up with for dinner when she was flying into LA. And then last minute, she couldn't meet up with them. So they had dinner alone. And that's how it all kind of started. And now these two have been married for like 2 decades and they have a gorgeous family. So really, this is the biggest love story we're ever going to talk about on this podcast. Oh, I love them. And he's like a chef now.
I remember reading that now that you mention it. Oh my gosh. But yeah, and it's so fun to see their dynamic in this movie compared to that movie. Not that there's too much interaction with them, which is almost why part of me is like, this is weird, because it's one thing that you're not dating, but you're not really even interacting with each other. I think of the 4, those 2 interact the least of all the different combinations of people that interact. Granted, that's because Barry chokes Julia at one point, so kind of hard to top that interaction.
Now that we've discussed the love outside of this film, you were mentioning earlier about the decision that was made to like not go to the cops, and how it's Barry who's very actively like, we shouldn't go to the cops, but Ray is also like kind of like solidifying himself as like, hey, I don't have the family you guys do, I don't have the money you do. The only people that actually want to go to the police are the girls. But Helen's a bit more like submissive, and Julie is just more like, you know what, fine. I'm not gonna be the only person. I just saw all of you guys like commit a murder. I think in the back of her head, she's like, I just saw these 3 people hit someone and like not want to go to the cops about it. I think something probably is inside of her like, it's probably my best interest not to fight that. But I feel like one of the reasons why Ray doesn't interact with Helen that much, that much, is because he doesn't really interact with many people throughout the whole film. They kind of set him up early on to be like, is it Ray?
Right, exactly. They very much want you to, I think they have a lot of fun with the idea of, let's make the audience think it's someone they know before they realize, no, not even close. And I think it's almost kind of cool to do that, where it's just like they're all suspecting each other with the guilt because it's been so long. So there's a lot of confusion. It's like, why now? Is this person just messing with us? What's going on? So I remember when the first time when I watched it, I don't know about you if you felt this way, but at first I was like, oh yeah, it's totally Max. And then, he died really quickly, and I was like, okay, now it's looking like it's Ray. And for the longest time, I was like, it's got to be Ray, right? Like, how could it not be? I don't understand. And then when he showed up in the trunk, I got confused for a second. And that's never really quite explained as to how there is a body that looks like his in the trunk and then disappears. It's one of the plot holes for sure. But it's really interesting that they want you to think it's him to the point where he's barely in it and like nothing, he's untouchable in a sense as well. And I was discussing it with my roommate because we watched together and it was his first time seeing it. And I was like, I'm trying to figure out why it would be like, what's the reasoning behind writing it that way, other than let's make the audience think that, you know, he's the killer, so we need to have him look as suspicious as possible. Like, how do you justify the fact that this, the killer never went after him as much except for a letter that we don't even see? And I was wondering if maybe it has something to do with his connection to the sister that he was dating, sort of thing. And then he brought up a good point, my roommate, about possibly since his dad was a fisherman, and since he's a fisherman now, maybe there's some sort of connection there that that the killer had that made him more reluctant, either with the father or with him himself, that they work on the docks together, that sort of thing, that he's more hesitant to go after like a fellow fisherman.
Oh, I like that. I like that thought process. My question to you, in order to continue this topic, is like, is there a sequel?
Yes, there is.
I still think it's Ray. I personally still think it's Ray. I think the reason they wrote it that way is to build up to a sequel. I think they wanted to create a franchise from the get-go, like this director. And keep in mind, I've only seen this movie. I didn't even know if there was a sequel. I didn't research that prior to coming to this podcast because I wanted to just have a conversation with you. He kind of tells us why it would be Ray. He says to Julie, I just wanted you back. He kills off Helen.
He kills off Helen, and he kills off Barry, because they're the two people standing in his way to get Julie back. And then the second they're back together, like, Julie's life starts getting better. She starts, like, you know, engaging in school more. He says, I love you. And he always said he loved her. He always had the motive. And I know you might be thinking, like, oh, well, killing someone and, like, torturing someone and being sadistic is, like, a weird motive. But if you read up on true crime as much as I do, honey, that ain't a weird motive. I think he's trying to keep her down so that she has to come back to him. I think it's Ray. I think he was working with the guy.
So with that theory, then, would you have put anything to, because I feel like almost that's like the little bit that's missing for me, that I feel like most filmmakers would put something in at the end to make us still think, wait, the killer's not dead. And oh, was it Ray this whole time?
So I wouldn't want you to think it was Ray this whole time, because I think the whole gambit of like revealing that it's Ray only works if the audience is fully like, oh, it couldn't be him, it's not him, oh, they got the wrong guy. But what about when she's in the shower at the end and it says, I still know, and then something shatters the glass? That's a pretty big, like, the killer is still alive.
Right, but then so with that, right, with your theory, I'm not trying, because I like the theory, but I'm just trying to understand, then if he got her, why would he do that?
That's what I'm saying. Like, he would keep continually like torturing her so that she has to constantly go back to him. Like, baby, I'm scared. Like, I'm scared. Like, blah, running back to him as like a source of comfort.
Okay. Interesting. I feel like, yeah, I feel like there's some ways that you could support this, including that when they're on the beach, he scares her there as well. So it seems like he does that a lot and likes to scare her. But it's again, me, I'm like, I just feel like that's the writer trying to really make us suspicious of him the whole time. And then have the killer be like, come out of nowhere. I did see the sequel. I don't remember the sequel. But as far as I remember, it's not really connected in that way.
Is it the same cast?
Those two survive, and then there's new people that come in.
Well, let's go back to talking about this film. Let's talk about this film. So they decide they're not going to go to the cops, and then their lives kind of go to shit. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting to see how guilt affects all of them, if not so mainly Julie. It seems like it's mainly Julie and then Helen that are affected. We don't really see, I don't really know if Barry was affected at all, other than just being super aggressive whenever it comes up. And it seems like Ray was affected behind the scenes, and that he went and like saw the family and that sort of thing. But then we don't really see him being like, he doesn't appear tortured the same way, maybe because he's already got that was his resolution, was to go see the family and then end up having a thing with the sister and all of that. But like, Julie looks like death. They literally comment on her looking like death. And then Helen doesn't look like death because I don't think that's the kind of person she is, but she doesn't end up staying in New York, that sort of thing. So those two are the most affected by everything that happened. And I would almost say it's because Helen is, I feel like maybe Helen would have been less affected if it weren't for the fact that she lost Julie at the same time. Because I think that night, Julie didn't, yes, out of self-protection, I think she agreed, but I think it was almost, then she made the decision of, I'm never seeing these people again because they've lost my trust and my respect kind of thing. Like, how is this even a conversation?
I think it's also like she doesn't want to see them again because they're a constant reminder of what they did. You know, like you can't, like there's no coming back from that. There's no reconciling. That's like, you can't do something that so wholeheartedly like shatters your soul and then continue to see those people as if it's normal. Because even Barry and Helen don't stay together. They break up, you know? And you would think that at least they would stay together. What I think is very interesting in this movie, and I have to remind myself that it's a teen slasher and that's what it is, just fun. The characters are all just like really underdeveloped. Like we're told what they are at the very beginning, like Helen's pretty and wants to go to New York to be an actress. Barry is going to be a football player, but then we never really see him doing anything. We don't really see his family. He's just kind of a douchebag. Ray is poor. That's all they really say, is that Ray keeps saying over and over again, like, I don't have your money. I'm like, then what do you have? I don't get it. Like, no, that he's a fisherman. I'm like, that's chill. You live in a fisherman town. That sounds like a lucrative industry, in my opinion. And then Julie's smart and gonna be a lawyer. Like, they say these things. And then the rest of the film is just them getting chased and murdered and butchered. And then like the who is it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? And I guess my reasoning for why I wanted to be Ray is because I just think it's too easy that like it just happens to be someone else. You know what I mean? And it didn't even make sense. Like, I didn't feel like it connected at all. I feel like if Julie didn't tell the audience like straight up, like, guess what? It wasn't that guy. It wasn't David Egan. It was the guy who killed David Egan. We killed the killer of David Egan. And then, oh, but we didn't kill him. It's this other dude. I just was like, what? I kind of wanted it to be someone we know, because then it's actually something, it's like the Scooby-Doo effect. You know what I mean? The villain is always so much more shocking because they've been a part of the investigation. It was you. And so for this time, I was just kind of like, oh, it's that guy. No, kill him.
I see what you mean, but I am going to ask, if this movie was written this way and at the end it's revealed that it's Ray, how on earth would that be surprising? Because the whole time they drop hints and make you suspect him the entire time. He looks really suspicious. He's barely ever around. Barry literally accuses him because he's like, oh yeah, that's fair. You got a letter. I got hit by a car. She got her hair cut off and she got a dead body in her trunk. That seems balanced. Like the whole time, even they're suspicious of him. And Barry throughout the whole thing is even like, you've got a fisherman's slick, don't you? And that sort of thing. So I feel like if I was to then at the end find out it's him, I'd be like, okay.
So I vibe with that. I'm a riff off that. I would keep the other man. I would keep this other murderer, Bill, whatever his face is. That's what I'm saying. I think it's Ray and they're working together, because I would love at the end that once he finally has Julie, like when he finally has Julie, everything is all falling into place. We no longer suspect him. Like our guard is completely down. They have joined together to like fight off this guy. Like the second that happens, you automatically don't suspect Ray anymore. You're just kind of like, oh my God, please be safe. I love you guys. I wanted that to be the moment. I wanted that to be the plot twist. I was like, oh, I would have died if that was the plot twist. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, we suspect it's Ray. The whole time we like, it's you. And then the other gentleman comes in. Gentleman, he's a murderer. And then boom. That's when would have been like shocking for me. But
I will say the reason I like it, have you seen Scream?
I love Scream. The second you said that it was written by the same person, I was like, that's so funny. Because when I was watching this movie, I was just like, oh, this is the blueprint. Because if this didn't exist, Scream wouldn't exist.
Right. And I guess I won't go into that too much because I'm sure at some point we'll watch that and do one maybe next Halloween, whatever. But what I really like that the writer does, so for Scream, the whole time he makes it seem like this other killer that we don't know at all. And then the twist is it's someone you knew this whole entire time. And in this one, it's the exact opposite, where the whole time we think it's someone we know, and the twist is you have no idea who this even was in the realm of possibilities. And I feel like that's the idea. That's why, to me, it was still a twist, because it's, yeah, I wasn't thinking that. I kept thinking, who is it that we know? Is it the sister? Is it this? Like, he introduced a lot of characters that seemed suspicious, and there were shots of them that made them look suspicious. And then especially Ray. And then suddenly it's like someone you wouldn't even expect, because maybe you even thought it was the sister, the weird sister that they went to visit. And it's none of those characters.
And let's just talk about the fact that that beautiful man joins the Riverdale cast. And also, one of my favorite actors of all time is in that movie, but we're going to talk about it at a different time.
We can also
Anyway.
talk about how there's another Scooby-Doo franchise actor in that movie.
That's the actor I'm talking about! I love him. He oh my god, he deserved such a bigger career. He deserved everything. He was so good. Anyways.
Matthew Lillard is amazing, and he got screwed with Scoob, but I'm glad his voice wasn't in it, because that movie was terrible. Anyway, yeah, it just, based off of how they wrote Scream as well, and how it's very much, you know, this is what it is, and they just kind of say it, and they kind of do that in this one too. I don't think the screenwriter would do that sort of theory without hinting at it, or just saying it, or do something to make the audience catch on a bit more. That just doesn't seem like their style. But I still think it's a fun theory. Like,
I'm still gonna hold on to it. I can watch every single part of this franchise, and I'll still be like, it's Ray. I still think it is. I love the use of comedy with horror in this film, as well as Scream. I think that's so cool. It definitely, like, if we're on a spectrum of 100%, it's definitely like 85% horror. Like, it's just 87% actually horror, but that 13% is still very funny. Like, I thought there were so many aspects of this movie that didn't scare me, just because I've grown up on films like Not Another Teen Movie, or like, what's that franchise with Anna Faris where they're making fun of Scream?
yeah, so Scary Movie is mainly based off of I Know What You Did Last Summer and Scream. So it's really fun. They even have the beauty pageant scene in there and everything like that.
I didn't have any of the source material. I even saw technically Scary Movie before Scream, and then I watched Scream, and Scream is now one of my favorite films. But the point I'm trying to say is that, like, because I watched these movies, they also make fun of The Exorcist, and they also make fun of, like, Final Destination. Like, every horror movie is up for grabs in Scary Movie. But because I grew up on those movies, watching I Know What You Did Last Summer, I was, like, laughing. Because every time the note is written, I realized it's not menacing. It's really not like, I still know. That, like, the hook through the neck, being dragged, and, like, the fact that he cut her hair, just all that stuff made me laugh, and I loved it. I was really into it, I will say. This is a sleepover movie, if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, I agree. And I will, now that you mentioned the hair really quickly, it's also really fun that the killer's going after something that everyone else cares about, right? Again, except for Ray. But we see him go after Barry's car and crash it. He cuts Helen's hair. And then the most important thing to Julie is Ray. So Ray's body is in the trunk. And so that's kind of like the killer just psychologically tormenting them as well before he actually just kills them.
I mean, if the killer is going after everything that someone cares about, I guess Julie's something that Ray really cares about.
And really quickly before we move on, because you're so right, I do want to just, I do want to, you're right, because then at the end is when, and so that, but then that still supports the idea that it's not Ray, because at the end, finally, he gets what's coming to him, and that the thing that he cares most about is being threatened, which is Julie. You're absolutely right. So they all get theirs, I guess. Although his doesn't actually get destroyed. He gets to, and the same thing with her. They still get to keep each other.
Well, they're the final couple. They're the final, you know what I mean? They're the final girl, whatever.
Well, it does seem like some sort of commentary on how the other two are more shallow. So theirs are materialistic objects, even though they were also a couple. It's not, neither of them are concerned about the other person getting attacked.
Although I did really like the beat that when Julie goes to Helen's house after her hair gets chopped up, we see Barry there. I thought that was nice. I thought that was very nice. It's like a little wink to the audience of, like, they had something. So the body in the trunk. I love the fact that that's written in. because I think something about Julie that I find very interesting is that the guilt really is making her go crazy. Like, I think the guilt eats away at her more than anyone else because she truly, truly, truly has a moral compass. She wants to be a lawyer. And so I think that that's a very interesting thing that they wrote into the script because it's the only oddity that isn't explained. It isn't seen by anyone else. It doesn't remain in the timeline of the film. It's the only thing that, like, blink and you miss it. Barry thinks she's crazy. Ray's not really dead. You know what I mean? It's like a flash of fear rather than a physical, like, Max got murdered. That's not being undone. You know, like, that's not a surprise. This David Egan, he is dead. These are like facts. That's the one thing that people are looking at her like, you're crazy. And I think that's something that's very interesting for, like, guilt can literally consume you. And so for me, after that beat, I started to, like, question everything that Julie saw or did from that point onward. So even then, like, I still know, I think it can be Julie's subconscious in a certain manner as well that could be drawing her into, like, insanity.
I love that. I agree with this theory a lot more. Yeah.
It was right. This movie made me so nostalgic for the 90s. Like, I loved the cell phone, the chunky cell phone. Like, I thought to myself, is that a landline? And then I realized, no, it's a fucking cell phone.
Yeah, I guess my only other thing that I want to talk about that I thought was fun, other than the trunk too, when she does go back, I thought it was fun to have the imagery of there being an umbrella there to represent the hook hand instead. So that was kind of a little cool thing that they did.
I don't even notice that. Wow. Wow.
And then I was gonna say, what I really like too about the opening scenes is when they have the whole telling of the story of the different versions of this legend. Not only is that really cool because I've never really seen that before where it's everyone knows the story but they just know different versions as opposed to, like, you know, someone telling them a scary story kind of thing and everyone's scared. It's more like, no, this is how it was. This because it's just that big of a legend in the town and everyone knows some sort of version of it. But what I really liked was in one of their versions of the story, I can't remember whose, it's mentioned that this killer goes after people who lost their virginities, like people who have sex, like after they're no longer virgins. And it was interesting to bring up that theme because I think essentially what it's doing, because later that night Julie does lose her virginity, but it's not done in a way where it makes you think, see, this all happened because she had sex. It was more like, hey, you know what's funny? How many horror films do it where it's, if someone's scandalous, then they die. We're just going to show that those are legends and myths, and then that's not actually true, because the reason why these people got attacked is because they had an accident and then they didn't fess up or do anything about it, and they were just kind of bystanders in their own lives. It has nothing to do with the fact that they had sex or were promiscuous at a young age, because they can still do that. That's irrelevant. We just want to debunk that whole idea of this is why horrible things happen to teenagers.
Wow. The second you started speaking, I was like, she takes off her, and he goes, are you sure? And I thought to myself, I was like, that's weird. Like, I love this consensual king, but, like, you know, like, I'm just like, okay, cool. And I like that they didn't put a lot of, like, emphasis on it. That's so cute. I love that so deeply. Something you told me about this in Practical Magic, and I think we're just, you know what's funny? And this is like a beat for the listeners. You know what's funny? That every film that you and I select is subconsciously revealing to the other human being just like a little bit more about us. Like, for example, A Walk to Remember. You pointed out that Landon Carter is everything I've ever wanted in a man. I pointed out that Patrick Verona of 10 Things I Hate About You is everything I've ever imagined for you as a partner. Number 2, Practical Magic. You pointed out that I would have directed Practical Magic, 100%. I will say, you would have made this movie. I mentioned in the intro, I said, you love to point out the tropes and turn them on their head. And that's what this screenwriter has become famous for doing. Opens the film with the scary story, the ghost story that everyone in the town has known. Belize, I've read your writing. I feel as if this has happened, something you've done. We have a web show not a web show. We have a short film that we're gonna be making for you in 2021 that kind of does a similar thing. Wink. The point I'm trying to say, I think it's very cool to see your source material.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think you said it perfectly as to why I like it. I feel like I was pointing out the tropes without pointing out that that's what it's doing, and that's why I like it so much. But yeah, let's look up really quickly if I Know What You Did Last Summer came out after Scream.
I'm already on it.
Okay.
This came out after. That's why he didn't make it Ray. Oh my God! That's why he didn't make it Ray. This movie came out after Scream, so he's playing with.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a response. They're directly. It has to be that it doesn't happen in one because it happens in the other. And
it's so much more brilliant that he goes off of the popularity of Scream, where was the boyfriend. He's literally pointing out the tropes of his own horror movies.
How fun is that? That he's pointing out tropes of other horror movies while still pointing out tropes of his own horror movies. So he's like, mine isn't the rule either, because now it's become so popular that even mine is a trope. So we're going to even turn mine on its head, kind of thing.
Am I going to worship this man? Is this my new Kevin Williamson? If you were going to remake this film in 2020, what would you do?
Okay, so it's the source material exists already, and you're just remaking it. I feel like it's so obvious what I'm about to say of like duh, but like I would mainly modernize it and modernize the relationship and add in like the aspect of how relationships work with social media, and then there's a difference in how virginity is viewed now, or slut shaming happens now, and that sort of thing. Probably wouldn't still be in a fisherman town necessarily. I don't know if that's gonna translate as easily now, but you never know. It could still work. I like having the killer be like the other like that, and then I feel like I would want to show a little bit more. The main change I would definitely want to see is we don't get to see Helen's death. Like, we just like kind of zoom out into the alleyway. I want to see the death. I feel like that's like a fun moment that we miss, but I would want to have a lot more scenes with the four of them before they split off and trying to figure out. I feel like there's a lot less of the guys in this one, of Barry and Ray, and I would love to have seen their dynamic coming back together a year later after everything happens. And
I have thoughts.
First
of all, I love that. It's staying in a fisherman town, Belize. I would add a sex scene. I'd smut this up. 2020. We need it. Okay? I would add a scene where Barry, and this is my big thing, I would add a scene where Barry and Ray are alone together, and the killer comes, and that's where Barry dies, and Ray, like, keeps it a secret that he was there, and, like, leaves Barry for dead. Because I feel like that would add to us really believing, oh my God, is Ray the killer? Or is Ray working with the killers or something with that nature? I want to make them more three-dimensional. Like, Ray is like the nice guy and then Barry's the dick. And I kind of feel like I want to see a moment where Barry's like really good to his girlfriend.
Yeah. I think it'd be fun to like change up. Like, I feel like definitely would change the story a little bit what we're describing, but I feel like it'd be fun to do that. I get what you mean that it has to be a fisherman's town. I just almost wonder how then I feel like it's a remake, but it's not going to be set in the year 2020. I'm just going to remake it in the 2020. So then there also wouldn't be the social media aspect or anything like that I'm talking about. It would still be set in the 90s.
No, I'm saying like you can do all the things you just said, but then where is it going to take place? It would take place in this fisherman's town, but just like the way, like 2020 now. You know, I'm pretty sure that these fisherman towns also have cell phones. But I like what you're saying about the social media thing, because I think the torment and torture of like, I know what you did would be very scary in the internet world, because it's harder to keep things secret nowadays.
Sounds kind of like Pretty Little Liars, huh?
Oh my God, it's like Pretty Little Liars meets I Know What You Did Last Summer. Isn't that just what Pretty Little Liars is? It's just I Know What You Did Last Summer, but long form.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, you're right. And I love that show. I think the first season is great. Okay, yeah, so watchability.
You first.
Just say the rating. Don't do that whole, you go first and I'll base it off of where yours is at, because if I say 2 and you say 9, it's going to be awkward. So if I know you're going to say 9, I guess I'll say like 6.
The range of watchability for me is like a 4.5 to a 6, like somewhere there.
So you basically admitted that what you were going to do was depending on what my answer was, so now you gave a range. Sam,
I'm sorry, you know me. I'm so sorry, you know me.
there are going to be movies that you pick that I'm not going to like, and then it's going to be real awkward if I say 3, and right now we're having the situation where you're not getting an accurate thing because I'm in the room.
Okay, you know what? We have to respect each other. I respect you. You respect me. And there will one day be a time where you watch something that I love, and because I'm an over-the-top person, I might react negatively. And now I'm telling myself, you can't react negatively. You have to be a grown-up. But I am going to tell you from right now that if you don't like A Court of Thorns and Roses, so I'd give it like a 5, like a 4.5. Like it's like you could definitely walk out of the room like not miss anything. The character development is like really weak, and I don't know, like the plot twist I wasn't really that invested in, and I just kind of wasn't like I was kind of curious as to who's gonna die. I didn't know who the final girl was gonna be. I don't know why I didn't know who the final girl was gonna be. It should have been obvious to me, but I was just kind of like, oh, are they really gonna die? Oh, it sucks.
I will give it a 7.58 because I think it's cool to see this cast and see the source material for a lot of things. And I like that it turns its own tropes on its head. And finally, I love that it actually does kill off characters, unlike some horror movies where it's like, yes, everyone survives. Like really early on, we just see, nope, all bets are off. The main characters can die and will.
I do like that too, to be honest. That was which I think is what I was kind of saying in mine too. I was like, oh my god, these people are really gonna die. Like, you're really gonna kill Ryan Phillippe. Well, I was very happy when he died, but yeah. Next week, what are you watching?
Midsommar, as you pronounce it.
Midsommar. Are you a Target or a Target kind of person? Is really the difference. Yeah, you never met people who say Target?
Oh no, I have, but don't like to think about it.
Ugh, it's the scab of American society.
Target is like, if you say it ironically, I guess. But anyway,
No! You don't get the excuse! You're wrong, it's Target! Hi. I'm a hoot and a holler on dinner dates, and that's all I'm gonna say. We're gonna watch Midsommar, dress up in your floral, watch the movie prior to coming. Again, there will be spoilers.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys so much. Comment below if you liked the movie, what you would rate it. If you think Freddie Prinze Jr. was super hot, because that's what I was thinking half the time. And we will see you next week.
And if you think Ray did it. So, I'm Sam.
I'm Belize. And this has been Heartbreaker Film.
See you next week. Bye.